hand it over to Grace. May the good Lord rest their souls in peace. So I will hand over now for our official beginning to Grace Mwangi, who is the Executive Director of KCDF. Grace, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jackie. And thank you to everyone who signed in today to welcome KCDF into its 25th year, but also to be part of a conversation that is so dear to us as KCDF around building financial resilience. And thank you, all of you who have joined us, for joining us in also appreciating and recognizing the loss that we have gone through as East Africa, and we continue to pray for the friends, families of these two countries. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining the webinar today. We found it fit that it's important for us to have this very important conversation around building financial resilience. For those of you who might not know much about KCDF, we really started out as a concept, as a dream in terms of what we could be able to undertake to ensure that we have flourishing and resilient communities in Kenya. And so for us, as we commemorate our 25th anniversary, being able to assist civil society organizations to understand and delve deeper into the conversation around financial resilience is key. Today, we hope that we'll be able to meet the expectations that we have had from a lot of you who have been able to fill in the baseline survey that we had put, and also who have interacted with us on our social media platforms. We want to ensure by the end of the conversation, we've built a common understanding around financial resilience for civil society organizations. We've been able to help explore the mechanisms that are available to enhance financial resilience, but more importantly, to learn from peer organizations on how they've been able to build resilience. And so I'm very glad that we have on the call today key partners that we have been working with that have done great work around financial resilience. We also want to showcase the realistic challenges that are faced by organizations as they undertake the journey towards financial resilience. So to clarify, there's not one solution around building financial resilience, but we want to be able to share what we've been able to learn over the years. I want to, at this juncture, also recognize that we do have on the call today some of the KCDF trustees. I've seen Arthur Namu, the KCDF trustee, on the call, so thank you so much for joining us today. And also I've seen Janet Mawio, the former executive director of KCDF. Really, those two persons can tell this story with their eyes closed. And so we're so happy that they're here to contribute to the conversation. As KCDF, as I've said, we really want to focus on flourishing and resilient communities. And we do this by promoting social justice and sustainable development for communities. We realized very early on, for us to be able to undertake this work, we must focus on shifting the power. And so we are part of a number of conversations with colleagues also on this call around ensuring that communities actually are able to hold decision makers accountable, but also that they are in charge in terms of the use and distribution of resources. We realize that for communities to flourish, there must be resilience. And so how do we ensure that we mitigate, adapt to, recover from shocks that even COVID has shown us that we need to be able to reduce our vulnerability, not only as civil society organizations, as communities working and living together. We recognize the importance of working together. So I'm so happy that we have Kagiso on the call, who have been so instrumental in KCDF's journey towards financial resilience. For those who might not have interacted with us as extensively as others, we really work to support communities address their priority needs and looking at issues from a sustainable perspective. We value the importance of asset development, policy influencing, ensuring we engage with communities, partnerships and networking. And more importantly, towards this conversation, how can we ensure that organizations, civil society organizations, have access to funds that they can put towards asset development to really build their financial resilience? So looking at KCDF, our journey, really, it's like I said in the beginning, it started as an idea that has born into a reality. When KCDF began work around community philanthropy, we were fortunate enough to have a very good partner, the Ford Foundation, that worked with us around setting up community endowments. And one of the principles that we learned is around a matching grant fund, whereby we're able to match a shilling for a shilling for any amount of resources that have been raised by organizations working within communities. So KCDF was able to pitch this idea to various entities. And today we're privileged to have with us on the call our colleagues from South Imenti Development Association, which was one of the very first community organizations that took up the idea of actually joining us in setting up a community endowment. So we're able to speak to Othaya Development Association, Hope Trust, and CEDA as well, and interest them in raising resources from local communities, their own members, their corporate sponsors, anyone who was interested in their work. And as KCDF, with the funds that we had, we were able to match this grant. We're able to match this money and put it into what we have today, our endowment fund. As KCDF, we're also able to raise $1 million at that time. And this unlocked for us to also get a matching grant to our own endowment of $2 million from the Ford Foundation. So with this seed money, what I'll call seed money, with these resources, they were able to go into our endowment fund. At KCDF, we do support and work with organizations, community-based organizations, individuals as well, who are looking to really grow their giving. So we do manage an endowment fund on behalf of 25 fund builders currently. And like I said, not only are they organizations, but also individuals who want to leave a legacy. All the investment return that they make goes towards charitable purposes. So for Hope Trust, they were able to raise their seed money by getting resources from individuals, from corporates, and put that money into the endowment fund. From the return on investment, they're able to offer scholarships to vulnerable children. Othaya Development Association, like I had said, also were able to do the same, and CEDA, who we'll be hearing from later on. So for us as KCDF, we really found it important as we mark our 25th anniversary to speak more intentionally around financial resilience for civil society organizations, talk about the lessons we have learned, the mistakes we have made, but also to plant a seed of hope, to plant a seed that if we're able to get more organizations to have unrestricted resources that they can invest, then we'll be able to really move towards great action and building our resilience. So we invite you today. We hope you'll enjoy the conversation. Continue to engage with us as KCDF if you want to be part of our endowment fund group, and we'll be able to walk alongside you to be able to grow your endowment. I look forward to you enjoying the conversation and continuing to engage with us further. And thank you so much for joining us today as we mark our 25th anniversary. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to great and really thought-provoking questions. Over to you, Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace, and congratulations once again. What a wow. I know you've told a 25-year journey story in 5 minutes, but I know there are details and nuances and tears and joys that you've gone through. And like I told you recently, we want to be like you when we grow up. CivSource is 5 years. I'm sure there are many others that are younger. And so it's great that you're sharing your story, your journey, so that we can all learn. And one of the people that we're learning from today in terms of how they've built financial resilience, what it means to them, and the lessons they've learned is Cyprian Kirera Rungu, who is the chairman of the South Imenti Sustainable Education Fund. Mr. Cyprian is the chairman of the South Imenti Sustainable Education Fund. The fund is a community endowment founded in 2005 to mobilize resources so as to improve education in South Imenti, Meru County. It has been at the forefront in assisting needy students to enroll in different levels of education. Mr. Supriyan is the board chairman, Board of Trustees of the Environment Institute of Kenya, and a member of the Building Surveyors Registration Board. He has received honors, including Head of State Commendation and Honorary Fellow of the Commonwealth Association of Surveying and Land Economics. So we welcome you, Mr. Supriyan, to tell us your journey, tell us the story. How did you raise financial resilience? How did you go about it? What's the journey? What are the lessons? Welcome.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I am happy to be here today. Firstly, to wish KCDF a happy 25th birthday. Secondly, get a bit excited because I've been told members of the board of KCDF, particularly Mr. Namu is there, and the former CEO, Mawio. Janet, I think, and Bwana Namu, they came to see how we do things, particularly in education. And therefore, I will just make a short presentation. One of them is about ourselves, who is SINDA, South Imenti Development Association. And the next one is the setup of SINDA, how it was set up, how it mobilized the resources, the key achievements, the Community Endowment Fund. And I think I will maybe talk slightly more about the Community Endowment Fund because in the audience, there are people who have seen that fund at work. SINDA is South Imenti Development Association, formed about 1993 to assist the people to deal with their own problems. It is therefore a voluntary and non-partisan, not-for-profit membership association. Its commitment is to eradicate poverty in the constituency called South Imenti in Meru County through social development activities using local resources. These resources were actually mobilized through Harambes initially. And the motto is uprooting the roots of poverty in South Imenti. You know that once you have removed the roots, the tree definitely will die. It was registered on the 10th of August 1993. And in fact, the biggest question which was in the minds of the people who started the SINDA was, who gives donation to development partners, for example, like UK, USA, China, and so on. And we found it is actually they themselves who build their own capacities and they have the big heart to assist. So we had resolved in a meeting of 22nd May 1993 to form a CBO, a community-based organization, to raise local resources and to source for support from the partners. I'll talk about the local resources. We looked at both the money, the human also, and the human resource. And in the human resource, we were looking for things like expertise. For example, we managed to put up 36 day secondary schools using local resources, using actually drawings from the ministry, and having those drawings or those projects supervised by our own people who are working or who are retired from the ministry and were at home. So we can see that is one way where we are demonstrating that the local resources doesn't mean money alone. Even the human resource is very, very, very important. Can you move to the next slide, please? We, of course, opened an office at Nkobu, and that office we employed somebody. Of course, with the money we had collected in a form of an Arambe. And we felt that our guiding principle in the resource mobilization strategy was we use bottom-up approach, and that is why the projects had to go from Nairobi, because CINDA had two branches, one in Nairobi, one in Meru. They had to go down to the local area so that once they approve, then they start organizing the local resources. So, and then we looked at what did we have which would be of low cost, and what would give a high impact, or what would give us a result. A result which is, commensurate with, or a slightly a little bit more above the resources we are putting. And so we have done a lot of landmark projects. For example, in August 1993, we held a workshop at Nkobu, and in that workshop we did invite businessmen and the bank managers. We know then the cost of the finance was very high, and we required money to help, and we started a tea circle, and that tea circle, where the earnings from tea was used as collateral. And that circle has grown into what now we are calling Yeto Circle, with branches all over Meru and even a branch in Nairobi. And KCDF has worked with us all through, and we have been having meetings to come up with the projects, and these projects had to have approval of the people on the ground who want to do what it takes. In 1993, a two-day workshop was held. It identified most of the projects, and we agreed on the implementation strategies using local finance. Please, next slide. Please, next slide, please. Okay. Then on the 25th of May 1999, KCDF came on board. And you can see on the photograph there, we had the KCDF officers down to us. The death of CINDA. I think I need to talk about the death of CINDA, which is a very, very sad story. Around 2011, or around 2010, CINDA had made a lot of impact, particularly on capacity building of the locals. This is in keeping with what Julius Nyerere says: development is not roads and buildings, but it is the people themselves who should be developed, and the education is a part of that. It enhances that development. So around 2010, some people felt that the CINDA should be turned into an NGO so that it can source funds from the development partners. Elections were then held, and the CINDA NGO was registered. Of course, it was because of personal interest, and the resources, the strategies which CINDA CBO was using, they refused to avail those strategies to the CINDA NGO, and therefore the CINDA NGO did not take off. It has never taken off. However, because of the mode of doing things in CINDA, whereby it depended on volunteers. The volunteers then said, times have changed. We do not want, or we need to be paid for us to give back to the community. And therefore also CINDA CBO became dormant. But before them, before them, CINDA has a part of its program on education. It had established what I would call a community endowment fund. This fund, we called it the Endowment Sustainable Education Fund. The birth of it came 28th December 2093, where we held a very high-profile workshop with all professionals, academia, business people, and leaders, and we resolved that we needed at least a sustainable fund which would be used to support the improvement of education standards in Endowment. I will spend a little bit of time talking about that one. So this was actually now the birth of Endowment Sustainable Education Fund. And on the 21st September 2001, the community, Endowment community, particularly those who are dealing with the project on education, myself included, we invited the late Dr. Atanzi to come and tell us about the education fund. This was because he himself, he had already gotten, he had his own foundation. And therefore, after that, we tried various methods of raising funds, and we came now across building a community endowment fund. First of all, we did the Harambes, and we realized that the Harambes had their own weaknesses, particularly the Harambe fatigue, lack of political trust and goodwill, where some of the politicians felt that when you do the Harambe, you want to take away their parliamentary seats, and this became a big issue. In 2003, the District Education Board, we approached them to authorize some schools to raise money for us. And that is the way we raised the money, 50 shillings. And it was a one-off, 50 shillings from every primary school child and 100 shillings from every secondary school student. This was again in March. We did an Harambe in Meru, which didn't do very well. But we did now another Mamo, the Harambe in Nairobi, where we raised quite a bit of money. We approached also the County Council of Meru. We had the bursary program with them for a long time. They gave us some money, and a total of 5.80 million was mobilized. And this now was the money which KCDF assisted us by matching it a shilling for a shilling. That money has been has been utilized properly, as I will say later. First, we did a memorandum of understanding between ourselves and the KCDF Board of Trustees, and we signed that trust on the 31st of May 2004. It was the first memorandum of understanding, so it has quite a bit of some loopholes which needed to be looked at. And the KCDF in March 2009, they came up with now a revised MOU, which now the fund builders are signing. CCF has since mentored also other stakeholders. Like you can see in the photograph, there is Riongo during his youthful days talking to the late Kabuya Muito, who was actually the first chairman of the ODA, that is the Endowment Fund. And you can see how it went in. Now, the objective of the fund was supporting the improvement of education standards in Imenti South in perpetuity. This support came in the way of giving, supporting education days, and actually it's a ratio every year we do that, except 2017, where politics came in and we stopped a bit. We also give prizes on that particular day to reward the excellence. And we have also supplied the science equipment to day secondary schools and the revision materials for both the primary and the secondary schools in conjunction or in consultation with the National Examination Council. I am happy again to note that Namu and Janet are in the audience because in 2007, the launching and the distribution of these materials was held in Meru, and they were invited guests, including the late Professor George Saitoti. So CCF has had a big impact on the ground. I must say a lot of it because so far from 5.80 million marched to 11.6 million. It is now a fund of about 33 million, according to the latest development. And up to 25th March this year, we had utilized about 15 million from that figure. So you can see over that period, about 53 million, or about, no, call it about 80 million has been generated, and it forms a good resilient. We have had mistakes as we went through. One of the mistakes is actually involvement of politicians in the program. Our constitution is that the MP of the area becomes the patron of the fund. And this has actually given us quite a bit of a problem because sometimes we arrange programs and the MP says they don't add the value. And when you look at this, we see it is personal interest. There is involvement of government officers as the determinants of activities to be carried out. We do not have a constituency as a CCF. The constituency rests with the projects committee, which is shared by the area district education officer, and which also includes the DCC or the DC. And therefore, when the MP talks to them, then they will get out of hand. So some of the activities may be slowed down because of that. Then there was also failure to incorporate the periodic review in the program in this memorandum we signed. That would have helped us actually arrest some of the situations as we went through. Reliance on the volunteers without a policy. We did not have a policy. We only asked whoever wanted to come and volunteer, let he or her volunteer the services. And that's the way we have been working all through. But now we realize with the changing times, where now the current generation doesn't think about giving back the community, they need to be paid for every activity that they do. We need to have a volunteer policy. Then there is also the weakness in the weak governance structure. We noted right from the beginning that the governance structure of CCF was weak, in that it did not have succession planning and things like those. So with those very many issues, we have again suggested ways of arresting them. I wish to end my presentation there. Wish KCDF strong growth as we are
Thank you, Cyprian. I think you froze just a bit towards the end, but thank you so much for sharing your story, for being raw and real. It hasn't been all butterflies and roses. And thank you for sharing your journey. And I'd like to invite the participants. Please share your takeaways. What are you learning? What is resonating for you? What ideas are you taking away for yourself? Share them in the chat. If you have particular questions for any of the panelists, drop your question into the Q&A. I already saw someone asking whether the presentations will be shared. I'm sure that they will. We will now go to the second story, which will be told us by Kotso Schumann, who is the CEO of Kagiso Capital. He is currently, Mr. Kotso that is currently the Chief Executive Officer of Kagiso Capital, which is an investment company established by Kagiso Trust. He has been involved with the trust for over 20 years and has been its CEO for 10 years. He successfully managed Kagiso Trust transition from being dependent on international grants from donors such as the EU, the Japanese government, and the Swedish Development Agency to a trust that is now self-financed through its investment company. He was responsible for managing the 260 million Rand annual budget of the trust. And I know we are all charged and ready to hear, because we all want to walk that journey of dependence to independence and interdependence as well. So Mr. Kotso, you're welcome to share with us.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and thanks to Grace and the team, the whole staff of KCDF for such a wonderful event. And want to congratulate the KCDF Foundation for this major milestone on their journey, and hoping to be part of this event again when they celebrate another big milestone. I also want to acknowledge Arthur's presence in this event, and Jeanette's presence in this event, and I think they probably could have done a better job possibly to talk about Kagiso Trust and the relationship that we were able to build with KCDF Foundation over the past couple of years, and I think this is highly appreciated. What I really want to do is to share with the colleagues the Kagiso Trust journey, and really share with you key milestones of the Kagiso Trust group, and share a bit of lessons learned and mistakes we made in the process. But also wanted to just comment on the new business thinking for the nonprofit sector. For me, why this sector has to engage in this conversation is quite important. And I decided to take the story, the journey we ran as the last slide, because I really wanted to give people a sense on where Kagiso Trust is. And what I want to talk to you is to take you through the Kagiso Trust group structure, the investment group structure. Natasha, I'm not quite sure. Can you maybe bring all the other information that is connected to that slide, because it creates good context for the colleagues. Aye.
Mr. Kotso, you can go ahead in the meantime.
I think the thing I wanted to talk to, it's more the organogram that I think, and this is the slide I wanted to talk to. I thought I should give people a sense where the financial resilience of Kagiso Trust is sitting to date, right? And I'll tell the story later. Kagiso Trust set up Kagiso Capital in 2015, and it was with an intention to diversify the trust beyond its other investments. This company was set up to date, we did an evaluation. The net value of Kagiso Capital is now sitting at about 935 million rands. In 2005, Kagiso Trust participated in a BE transaction, and possibly a lot of people know that in the country, in the early 90s, government promulgated a law that wanted to transform the economy. And therefore, there was a requirement for most businesses that were predominantly white-owned, where the law required them to start transforming and bringing in Black shareholders. And in 2005, we participated in a transaction where we bought with other NGOs, and by bought, I think we went out and raised money, or we were invited to participate, and we bought into one of the 4 top banks or group holding companies in the financial services called First Rand. As we speak, the value of Kagiso Trust in that bank is just over 5 billion rand. And in that same transaction, First Rand, Kagiso Trust then was able to buy a small amount, I think it's about 0.something%. And that value in momentum is sitting at about 214 million, and the same in Discovery. In 1993, we set up our own investment company called Kagiso Trust Investment, and I'll talk to it. In 2011, we merged that company with another company. We created what is called KTH. As we speak, the value of KTH to date is sitting at about 2.9 billion rand. The trust sits with a net asset value of just over 8 billion rands, right? And in this next slide, I wanted to give people a sense. Natasha, can you bring in, not this slide, that same slide? I think there's an amount. You guys sent me a new slide where you showed. What I wanted to show in the slide, I wanted to show, and the reason I'm showing the trust in the middle, wanted to show to date, right, the trust on an annual basis, right, receive dividends from some of these companies, particularly from First Rand, of just over 150 million rands annually, right? And if the assets perform quite well, that dividends could move between 150 and 200 million. And when the assets don't perform quite well, that dividends would probably sit at about 100 million on an annual basis. And that's what the trust use to fund its development work. And that's what the trust use to leverage partnerships. Let's go to the next slide. And this is the journey we really went through. The trust was set up in 1985. And it was set up through money from the EU, the Japanese, SIDA, etc. But there was this announcement that was made in 1990, particularly when our late president was released, that is Madiba was released. The EU, particularly the EU, made all NGOs in South Africa aware that they will no longer fund NGOs directly. They will be working with the democratic government of South Africa. And that really had a huge impact on the NGO sector in the country. And we were also impacted by that announcement, particularly from the EU. But quite interestingly, in 1990, when that announcement was made, we at Kagiso Trust then got into a conversation, and we had 3 options. There was an option that there was a debate, and one of the options we were debating was that we should close down the trust because we will potentially be having a democratic government that is going to service the needs of the poor and the needs of the people. Maybe an organization like Kagiso Trust would not be needed. Fortunately, that view did not succeed. It was outvoted, and people felt, no, we will have a democratic government, but the expectation that we will not have the need to continue working with civil society does not make sense. So that view was not supported. In 1990, in early 90s, I think 91, the previous government, the apartheid government, created a non-profit company called IDT, the Independent Development Trust. And they established this trust with just over 2 billion rand. And some of the ANC people who were preparing for an ANC government had discussions with KCDF Trust and wanted KCDF Trust to consider, when the ANC takes over, to merge the IDT with KCDF Trust, right? There was a debate. There was also people that felt maybe we should merge with the IDT, but there was also a view of people said, if you merge with the IDT, you lose your independence. It means you become a government entity. And the third view was that, why don't you explore the idea of going out and setting up an investment company that could support us? And that was the idea that really succeeded. And all of us supported the idea of setting up an investment company. In 1993, we set up our first investment company called KCDF Trust Investment. The trust took some of its reserves and put it into the investment company. Quite interestingly, the trust went around in the country and spoke to the banks and wanted to raise money from the banks. And the banks, normal things that the banks would ask you, security and whether you've got security, if they give you money, you lose the money, how are they going to get back their money? So we did not get any funding from our local banks. And quite interestingly, the late CEO of the trust then had relationships with people in JP Morgan's, and JP Morgan's gave us a loan of about 5 million. By then, the exchange rate was 3 to 5. So the loan was about 15 million rands. We started the investment company with about 25 to 28 million rands. In 2011, when we merged our investment company with another company, we did an evaluation. The evaluation in 2011 indicated that the value of KCDF Trust investment that we started in 1993 was sitting at about 3 billion rands. And that merger then created KTH, and KTH was valued just above 6 billion rands. And like I indicated, in 2005, we participated in this deal. And this deal was funded by a lot of institutions. In 2010, the deal was fully de-geared, so the whole debt was paid. And when that debt was paid, I think the value of the trust was sitting between 1.5 and 2 billion rand, net asset value of the trust. And in that time, when we merged in 2010, when we looked at the value of KTH and our interest in First Rand, the asset value of the trust was sitting at about 5 billion rand. In 2010, I think between 2010 and 2015, I think Atta and Janet will assist, we participated in a conference, and I've always had a view, and I said to my board, I think it actually doesn't make sense for KCDF Trust to have created what we've created, but we don't go out in conferences and share with the nonprofit sector in the continent on how we created this. We participated in an Africa philanthropy conference. I think it was in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, Jeanette. And I presented at this conference. And at that conference, it was Arthur and Jeanette, actually, that wanted to have a far bigger conversation on how is there any possibilities that we could work with them and assist them in conceptualizing an idea of setting up their own investment company. And I'm quite excited and quite proud that that conversation led to us still learning. We're still hoping we can build a very successful company that led to the establishment of what we now call KCDF IH, which is an investment holding company of the foundation. Currently, the company is owned 60% by KCDF and 40% by Kagiso through Kagiso Africa Investment. And there are conversations that we are having on how we can seed the investment to the foundation in its own totality. And that's really the journey we've been traveling. The trust is currently now busy. Natasha, can you go back to that previous slide? The trust is busy now having conversations on how to create another endowment besides the investments, but more a cash endowment that could make the trust continue. And the trust is probably going to create an endowment and start that endowment with about R1 billion. And that's really where the trust is to date. Like I indicated, the trust is sitting with an asset value of between 80 to 9 billion rand. The next slide. And I thought I should share some of the pros and cons of lessons learned. One of the big lessons for us was that because we were able to create a situation where we have got our own development money, right? That really positioned us to be able to have conversations, particularly with government, as equal partners. And we would go to government, and the trust would go to government and say, look, we've got X amount of money. We want to spend it in this province. The condition to spend it in this province is that you must match us rand for rand. And out of that leveraging conversations that the trust really started having with government and the private sector, the trust has to date unlocked just over 400 to 500 million rand of both government and private sector money. If you put in the trust money, we've probably deployed just over R1 billion in development money just from 2005 till to date. And that's really what has made. And other big lessons that we've learned when we decided to establish a company, we decided to establish a company with an independent board and independent management, because we wanted the trust to continue focusing on its development work and the investment company to do the investment business and to grow the assets of the business. And we think for us that really, and that the biggest lesson we've learned is that if you have your own endowment resources, you can innovate, you can take risks and in executing your programs. And that's one of the biggest lessons we've learned. And I think for us, that's quite important. The other lessons we've learned is just the idea when you start an investment company, the big risk does exist, whether your values will be entrenched within the investment company. That always brings huge tensions. And the other big lessons we've learned is that when you start the investment company, you obviously don't have the resources to do the development work. The people who run the investment company expect you to give them a long-term view. And people would say to you, maybe give us a 10-year. What we did in Kagiso Trust, we took a 10-year view. And in that process, we had to retrench and cut back the trust programs with the strong belief that we will rebuild the trust programs when our dividend starts flowing in. But it brings a big tension between how big do you grow the company before dividend starts flowing into its development work? And that becomes a huge tension. And I think we've experienced it as Kagiso Trust. And also the idea of deciding on the sectors that people must invest in. Because you employ independent management, and in the independent management look at investments and want to do investments that would plow back cash. Whilst we as a trust are driven by a value system that says we're not going to invest in anything that is going to be harmful to man. One of the biggest debate we had with management during that time was the issuing of licenses to run casinos. And that became the biggest business in the mid-90s. And a lot of entrepreneurs came to us because they could not get their licenses, and they said, look, Kagiso Trust, can you become part of this deal? And we had to walk away and said, look, we're not going to. And the management of the company was extremely angry, and because they thought that could have created so much value. The other tension that you always have is alignment of interests between the management of the company and the trust, and that always brings huge tensions in the debate. And those are some of the lessons we've learned over the years. Natasha, next. And maybe mistakes we've made. It's not being deliberate in building our own technical investment capacity as civil society. For me, I think one of the biggest mistakes is us as a sector not being deliberate in saying, how do we build our own investment capacity? So that we then have our own people that run our own investment companies. So there's a need for us to start really becoming quite deliberate in saying we are going to play in the investment space. And because we want to play in the investment space to create investment assets, let's build our own capacity of people that would really go out in the market, who would represent our values and assist in looking at investment opportunities. And for me, one of the other big mistakes we've made, I think when grant funding came to an end, I think we started really focusing more in doing program work around programs we implement. And I think, and I must take some huge responsibility for that because I was the leader during that time. And we wanted to really focus on implementing programs. And I think we probably disregarded that, but we still have to continue building a strong civil society movement. And I think what our country is going through now, for me, I always say, it's because we've got a weak civil society, right? And I think for me, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes for me, I think we've made. And for me, the other thing is not being able to integrate other civil society organizations in our own. The one thing that I think we probably are not good at as civil society organizations is what the private sector is mastering quite well, is to merge entities, is to merge organizations that have different capacities, but that are good, and you merge them with an intention to create something very strong. I think for me, it's probably one of the big mistakes we've made. And lastly, I just think for me, I think there is a lot of change that is happening in the continent, both politically, economically, and socially. And I just think it is important for the civil society movement to start playing an active role in the economy, because I don't think this sector will be able to innovate if the sector is not financially resilient. And people who give you money will always want to focus on their own programs and on their own agenda. That is one. Secondly, I think this sector can meaningfully engage with partners, both government and business as equal partners, because we're so dependent on them. And I'm not going to go through the other points, but this is really the story of KCDF Trust and its investment companies and where the trust is today. Maybe if I had to comment around this, because I've spoken about it, one of the things that I think we were able to do, and I think civil society organizations probably underestimate the goodwill that they've created in communities. And I think what we were able to do was to begin to attach value, commercial value, to the goodwill we created in communities. And that's why we went out and wanted to raise money. And people did ask us, but you guys want us to borrow your money, you've got no assets. And it's because maybe people felt we were a bit arrogant in thinking the trust relationship we've built with communities can be monetized. And we were absolutely convinced that the trust relationship we built with communities can be monetized. And for us, I think that's really what led us to where we are as a trust to date. And I think the rest of the slides is really for people to read, and people can probably engage at a bilateral level with us if they want to really get the details. And I think I'll probably end the presentation here to allow for some discussion. Thank you very much, Jackie, and thanks to our guests and participants.
Thank you, Kotso and Cyprian once again. Just my mind is blowing. I don't know how the rest of our participants are. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What is resonating? What are you mulling over? What are the questions you have? Please drop the questions in the Q&A box. Tell us what your reflections are in our chat box. There's a lot to learn, a lot to learn. Two things I take away from Cyprian, it's people, power, passion, purpose, projects. And from Kotso, really ODM. And for Kenya, it's not that ODM, but our own development money. And it can happen. I saw Scholastica Julio asking that, but we're CSOs and we can't, our registration restricts us. Then set up something else, set up a branch. I think it's also us to open our minds to the possibilities, because I think it can be done, and we've been told that it can be done. I see many of us thanking our presenters for the lessons. People have been inspired. People want to, are thanking you for sharing such inspiring stories. So thank you so much. And for the presenters, also some questions have been dropped in the question Q&A. Please look there and prepare to answer them. Now we will segue into our panel discussion. And for our panel, we have two panelists, as well as Kotso and Cyprian. Our first panelist is Francis Kiwanga, who is the Executive Director of the Foundation for Civil Society, which is based in Tanzania. He has over 16 years of working experience in the legal and development industry. He worked in senior positions in various reputable organizations, such as the Foundation for Civil Society, which he currently heads, the Matrix Consulting Company, Legal and Human Rights Center. I think that's where I first met Francis long ago, and the Tanzania Federation of Cooperatives. He practices as an advocate in Tanzania and is an active member of various organizations and bodies, such as the East Africa Law Society. They are a member of the East Africa Philanthropy Network and many others. Our other panelist is Catherine Kiganjo, and I hope I said your name right, Catherine, who is the team leader, institutional strengthening and capacity building of communities. And Catherine works with KCDF and has been with them since inception for the last 25 years, serving in various capacities, and has experienced its institutional growth over the years. She has over 15 years experience of organizational development, people development, and corporate governance. Remember, Cyprian talked to us about governance. She's passionate and experienced in the enhancement of institutions' capacity and the growth of diverse community assets to address both long and short-term issues of interest to the communities they exist to serve. So we're excited to hear your own journeys, Francis and Catherine. What's it been like? What is financial resilience to you? And what is your organization doing about this?
So should I go first?
So Francis, ladies first.
Okay. Okay. Catherine.
Yes, I'll be speaking on behalf of the KCDF story. And just to say that for KCDF, financial resilience has been really key. And when you're talking about financial resilience, we are talking about the financial well-being of the institution. We are saying that the organization is focusing on long-term sustainability of the organization. So when you're talking about that, you're saying, how can we be able to have resources that we can have available for us when things are really rough, and that you're able to continue doing the work that you're doing? And I think more important is, are you able to do it with dignity? So you really are in charge and in control because you are able to raise resources that the organization is able to use when for the things that they really desire to do in the community. So that is KCDF's understanding and our approach on financial resilience. Yeah.
Francis, over to you. What is financial resilience to the foundation?
Thank you very much, Jackie. I also join others in congratulating KCDF for the milestone that they've been able to achieve. So I am from the Foundation for Civil Society. Briefly, we are an NGO, grant making and capacity development organization to CSO. So we were conceived at the time when from the recognition that CSOs are very important players in development process. Hence, we needed to set up this foundation, which will do those two things. One is do grant making, but also develop capacity of the NGOs so that they become key players, but also not only players, but players who have muscles, who have energy, who have ability to push the development agenda. So our quick story on how we have been resilient is, as I've explained, we are mainly, my colleagues from Kagiso said the funds conduit. So we are mainly the basket of fund that supports CSOs. So our sources of funds largely come from donors and mainly the bilateral donors. So we have been able to maintain the level of funding which gives us the ability to continue to work, mainly by having internal systems and mechanisms which really assures the people who are giving us money that their money which comes to us is safe. So, and by why we do, how we do that, one is we have deliberately created a very strong mechanism for accountability, because we believe whether money comes from bilateral donors or comes from philanthropy or comes from anyone, we have to have a certain level of accountability. So we have a system here of ensuring that we account for every shilling that comes to us, and we do that to our donors, the people who are giving us money, but also to our government, but also, most importantly, we have a system in which we are very transparent and accountable even to the people that we are serving. So even the CSO that we are serving, we try to have a system in which we show them that this is how much we have received, this is how we have spent, so and what has gone to who, which is very, very important. So I'm talking about accountability as one of the tools to ensure that you keep the people who are supporting you happy, and by doing that you can continue to be supported. We have also been very keen in diversifying our resources, and this has come from the recognition that when you rely on one source of support, there are obviously inherent risks that can come from that approach, and you can be exposed. So one good example here in Tanzania, people like DFID, or DFID was the main supporter of CSO work, but because of Brexit, so in 2020 they decided to pull out from Tanzania. Ourselves, we are the victim as well, because 50% of our budget used to come from DFID. So you can imagine the level of hardship we had to go through when 50% of your support is cut off. So we are not the only one. There are so many other organizations, and I think some of them now in the brink of collapse, because they were, DFID was the only source of fund that you used to support these organizations. So our story was, okay, much ways we had the good money from DFID, but we were able to diversify, having other donors, but increasingly from 5 years ago, we are really working so hard in ensuring that we tap in resources from large corporate foundations, which are from US and other places. There's also good money in that area, which can come and support our work. And lastly, on the issue of sustainability, I'm very, very happy today. I'm seeing my friend Koso, but also Janet Mawio, your Grace's predecessor. In 2017, we started having internal conversation within the FCS on how can we diversify our resources. And because we have our peers, so first was to go to KCDF and learn, practically learn. What do they do to become or to achieve all that they have been achieving all these years in becoming very a good model of supporting communities in Kenya. And that tour went also to South Africa, to KCDF Trust. So we had a good session with these two and a conversation with these two organizations to learn what are they doing really to how they have been able to do to get where they are at this point. So we used our network, our alliances to learn. And when we came back, it was management ensuring that we get a buy-in from the board, from members to sell that story. That we at the moment we have support from our current supporters, but we need to diversify. We need to do something else. And the idea of setting up our own trust then emerged, and I'm very happy to report to you by now. So now Foundation for Civil Society has its own trust, and it is at the nascent stage. We are babysitting it, but we are seeing very there's a big possibility of this trust of becoming at some point an entity which will be later on be supporting our work with our communities on what and support what we are doing now. So even now we're trying even to learn from KCDF, and Jack, you're coming from CivSource. There's so much learning and exchanges that we can do to ensure that we build strong resilience of our organization. So let me end here for now, and I'll be happy to continue later on. Thank you.
And you wanted to share just a bit of the story of what has worked, and then we will open it up to the plenary as well. So Catherine, go ahead.
Yes, talking about KCDF, Grace did talk in the introductory that KCDF was really an organization that was set up and by the Ford Foundation through a conversation in the early 90s. And once that whole idea now had to come to fruition by having the organization. So it was very important to have credibility from the onset. And so even as you begin to talk about building endowments or sustainable organizations, the need to have credibility, and by demonstrating what you can do on the ground in terms of community development work was one of the very key and important areas of focus that the foundation started with. So KCDF started by doing community development work, focusing on capacity building. Now, as we started now to engage on capacity building, we at least started to get credibility on the ground. But then there was the issue about how does the organization then begin to focus on the endowment or its own sustainability. So KCDF then began to invest in structures. Yes, it was important through the Ford Foundation that institution support was made available, so that KCDF could focus on building the institution and at the same time building an endowment. So we had built a strong board that has been very key in the leadership of setting up the foundation in its work. And then also driving with the leadership of the executive directors that have been in KCDF, began to lead the foundation in community development work, and also in focusing on how to build the various resources for sustainability. So we had the endowment that was set up. How do you then start building that endowment? The focus here had been on sustainability, then and diversification. So in meeting the match that the Ford Foundation had given the challenge to KCDF, KCDF then began to look at working with the community organizations, which we provided a challenge grant so that they could build the endowments. And KCDF also started to raise money to meet the match for the endowment so that we could build the resources into the endowment. But then how do you secure an endowment from the regular operations of the foundation? So of course the foundation continued to raise money from other sources, but then there was also having to secure the foundation the endowment, and therefore a trust was set up to ensure that they could be custodians of the endowment, and then also grow the endowment and other resources that the foundation would have in place. So the endowment then was held in the KCDF Trust, and this then was the vehicle that the foundation used to grow the assets. So KCDF has a structure of KCDF Board of Directors that manages the foundation's operations in terms of the community development work that we do. And then we have the trust, which then is the custodial, has the custodial and the growth of the investment. So in doing that, then the trust began then to look at how do we diversify the assets to grow the assets. So the foundation then, the trust then took up the challenge, and so KCDF took the endowment and then also has invested in property, which is a capital investment. In addition, the trust has also diversified in looking at the opportunity of land, a 16-acre piece of land that is also part of the diversification of the asset. And during the operations, the initial operations of KCDF was set up to be hosted by the Aga Khan Foundation. And during that time, Aga Khan Foundation really helps the foundation in the initial stages of growing as an organization. And at that time, we were sitting in an Aga Khan Foundation property in Pangani. And when we turned 10 years old, the Aga Khan gifted KCDF that property. And that property then was developed into an office block, which right now KCDF is being used for office space, but it's also rental income to the foundation. Other investment diversification is that KCDF has also invested in hospitality and residential properties in terms of diversifying the investment. I think what is important is to say that it is very important to start somewhere and just focus on how do you grow the assets that you have, and what are the structures that you have put in place that will support the growth of the assets. One of the things that KCDF also took advantage of is to apply for the tax exemption. As a non-profit, that of course then did help us with our investments in such a way that we would be able to plow back what would be then paid to as income, tax income was then plowed back to continue to grow the assets of the foundation. Yeah, so I think it's to say that being purposeful and very determined and very focused on the journey towards financial resilience has been very key for KCDF. Yes, there have been struggles in many different ways. Of course, being recognized as an organization through building ourselves as an organization has been very important. But then also working with communities for them to recognize that they have the capacity to build assets. And that is why, as introduced by Grace, we did work with community foundations or community organizations to build resources. And that has been KCDF's journey of purpose, starting small and building, and continue to take challenges where we were asked to raise money so that we could be able to build our resources for financial resilience. Thank you, Jack.
Hi, thank you so much. And yeah, this conversation is amazing. I'm sure we will need many more conversations after this, because we're all struggling, like I said, thinking about, dreaming about, wondering how, and starting journeys for some of us. So thank you so much, KCDF, for gifting us this very important conversation as part of your anniversary. So I'd like to open it up. I know we've been posting our questions, comments, and reflections in the chat. We've also dropped a few questions to the panelists, and I will come to someone from KCDF, from KCDF to help me read one or two of those questions. But I'd like to open it up to plenary. Please, I guess KCDF, you can see them when they raise their hands. I was going to say, please raise your hands and unmute yourself. So KCDF, I'll rely on you to help me choose the first 3 or 4 hands that go up. And please keep your questions short, sharp, clear, or your comments short, sharp, and clear. Thank you so much. KCDF, over to you. Who is raising their hands? Who wants to say something right now?
Jackie, I think one of the questions from the participants is in regards to CEDA, in terms of how are they able to correct the weak governance structure. And also there's a question from Zachary Makanya asking whether the organization is planning to revive CEDA so that it can work as a CBO. Perhaps that is a question Cyprian can tackle.
Cyprian, go ahead. Is he still with us? Did we lose him? There were also several questions for Kotso. Maybe we can take those for now as well.
For Kotso, in terms of lessons, setting up an investment company to support the development work, yeah? In terms of governance, can the directors serve in both entities successfully? I think the question is addressing an area around conflict of interest, perhaps.
Thank you. That's actually a very interesting question. And I think yeah, you're right. It does lead to conflict of interest. Yes, I think the long and short answer is yes, they can. But then it becomes quite important at the company level to also bring in independence, right? People that are not connected to the foundation or the trust. But the reason why you probably would want to have directors that sit on the trust and the foundation, the company, and still have people that represent the trust sitting on the company, is because you want your values to be protected, right? When personal interests creep in at the investment company, you do need people. You do need people that must remind people who run the business around the ethos and the foundation on where such a company comes from. Yes, you can have them sit on both entities, but you probably would have to want to bring in some people that would be regarded as independent.
Thank you, Kotso, for that. Maybe one, Jackie, for Catherine. Catherine, in terms of regulation and complicated tax regime, it is hard for CSOs to establish an endowment, yeah? So what's your advice for when it comes to community or CSOs setting up community endowment funds?
I think the question is depending on the regime or where you really are in the world, or in what one would look at what are the options that you have available. One of our experiences that with the tax exemption, your respective tax body will hold you accountable for the tax exemption. So it is very important that whatever work that you do, you can be able to demonstrate that any tax exemption you get, you can actually show for the work, because tax exemption, it has a limited period. And therefore, at the end of that period, before the renewal, you have to then be able to demonstrate you have done the work. So yes, tax exemption is good or can be available, but and depending on the regime or the country where you are, but then you have to also know that you must be accountable for that, for your tax exemption to be renewed. But it is open, you can apply, but it's a rigorous process. And I think that's what I could say about that. And maybe as one of the things to add is that in some cases where tax regimes encourage giving, that could also be a good place where organizations could be encouraged to raise money, because then people will benefit from tax exemption or claiming their tax what they pay or support for charities or give from their tax. So that it all depends. That those also could be opportunities for fundraising where the tax regime encourages giving. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you so much. And I see a question from Stella Lutalo, who is from SafeSource Africa, and it is to you, Francis. She's asking, how do you manage grant making from bilateral agencies with very stringent conditions and at the same time from private foundations with flexible conditions? How do you balance the extremes, Francis? Because yes, we all understand we should go diverse, but there's diverse and it pulls you in extreme opposites. So how do you manage that?
So at the moment, one is, it is not easy. Let me admit that. Partly because there's this tendency by many people who are supporting you to think that you are their project, because you're affiliated to them, so they want you to serve their, mainly serve their interests. So what we have done is build this, establish, but also be bold and have this conversation even with our donors, that maybe we need to be honest about what we want to achieve as an entity, but also much as for now you are serving us, we are happy, we are okay, but also we need to look at our vision as well. We as an entity, how do we want to be in the coming 10 or 15 years? So the little story about the trust that I've mentioned about. So when we come back from learning experience, set up internal mechanism, we are good to go and set up this trust. But it is now over 3 years, but up to this moment, we are still responding to some of the questions from our current bilateral donors on the viability of the trust, because they always have this fear, because you are setting up this trust, maybe you're going to leak some resources from the basket that we are managing that will go into the trust. While that is not the case, because when we set up this trust, one, we are very clear internally by having policies on one, FCS main, we are a non-profit. Because we are non-profit, we are compliant, and we always cater the interest of the people that we are serving, the government, donors, and the communities. Whereas this trust, from the day you go, it is very independent, and Kwagiso put it very well. For you to have a very viable idea about the trust, you need to have some people who are independent, but also people who are good in managing investment or doing things around commercial, but also having long-term and short-term and long-term vision of the company. So the trust is 100% independent. It is a company for profit, and it is compliant with all tax and other regulatory requirements. So it's at the moment, as we speak, is detached, somehow detached from FCS. Although the shareholding is 100% FCS, the idea being when this company grows and makes money, that the 100% of the dividend will come back to the foundation for civil society. So the message that I want to say here, I mean, we need to be crafty in the sense of managing or maintaining good relationship with your donors, at the same time having conversation about the need for you to diversify your resources, but also building a long-term support. And because partly we all know some of these donors may not be around in the coming 10 or 15 years. So when they leave the country, where will we be? So this is a big issue that you need to handle and manage. The issue of relationship, but also you standing firm, and also explaining to them why you want to do things the way you want them to be done.
Thank you so much, Francis. Grace, I had seen a question for you. I was busy looking for it. I can't seem to find it. And I think you were typing out a response. Do you want to read out the question and share your answer?
Thanks, Jackie. I think there were a number of questions that were raised. One was around how do organizations that are struggling with funding actually get out of that hole in terms of young organizations that are still struggling with funding. So what I was sharing is a program that KCDF has, and also this program is run in a number of countries around the world, called Change the Game Academy. So the Change the Game Academy includes different trajectories of capacity building. And the one I wanted to speak to is the local resource mobilization. So what we do is that we're able to offer capacity building to community-based organizations, civil society organizations on how to raise local resources. And when we talk about local resources at KCDF, not only in terms of financial, but also in terms of skills, non-financial contributions that are made by the community. So the Change the Game Academy is one way that we help and seek to help organizations to raise resources, building the capacity. They have a coach that works with them for an extended period of time so that then they can actually put into practice building local resources. Now, there have been a number of questions of where do I even start getting the investment? That is one way, by building local contributions that you receive as an organization and investing that money, because then the interest that you earn goes back into the community. But as Catherine has said, the structure that you set up, Kotso talked about this, the people that you have on the board, the relationship that you have with your tax agency is very important, and above all, credibility to carry out this work. I think I'll stop there. Cyprian is back, and there were a number of questions to Mr. Riungu, so perhaps he can take those. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you so much, Grace. Cyprian, I don't know if you heard the questions. One of them was you shared a challenge around around governance, and someone wanted to know, how did you address it? You shared it as a challenge, but what did you do to address it? Because governance is part of the way we build our credibility, even with the people that we relate with.
Right. I think before I answer that one, let me say this: the simpler one, revival of CIDA. Yes, we are actually on the ground already, because there is public demand that we reinstate CIDA. So we are working on that. Secondly, there are quite a number of questions, particularly about the governance structure. We are reviewing that with a view of putting this fund away from being controlled by the politicians, because some of the politicians will fear other politicians' projects. In fact, that is why this country is very much behind, because some new politicians will not want even to complete their older politicians' projects. And this, according to our MP, he takes it as if it was the former MP's projects, and therefore they are, they are not good for him. So what we are doing is we are now going to create a structure where we have like a board of a few people, not many as we have currently. And then below there will be an employee who will also take care of other CIDA projects like agriculture, like health, livelihoods. Let's call it livelihoods. Because in that livelihoods, we even intend to revive the environment, because the environment was solely the women project in CIDA. And there was also the roads, and the construction was for the youth in CIDA. And we found that those projects were very useful to the people who were actually benefiting, although there was, out of what I would call volunteerism. In that structure, we are also going to look at the volunteers. If you want to volunteer, where do you come in and where do you exit? If this fund, for example, like the way it is, once we invested that amount of money, we as a community, we have never even taken other initiatives to add to that, to that kitty. And therefore, the new structure will even look at other ways of beefing up or increasing that fund so that the fund from the endowment fund is utilized for not only education, because currently it is only on education, so that it can be employed. I mean, the income can be used for other developmental projects, which will be bringing in also additional funds to the endowment fund. So it's going to be like a circle where you give, you take, and then you give again, and you take, and it goes round. Meanwhile, we will also have a time frame for now in the governance. We will say if it is an officer, say for example, if it's like the chairman, he should serve for only a period of maybe 5 years. After 5 years, there should be another election where another chairman is elected. So there will be a succession planning within the governance structure, which currently is silent. It is silent. The succession planning is completely silent. The number of years an office bearer should sit in that office is also silent. And that has made people, those who have no interest, to just disappear. Those who are threatened by the politicians, they also disappear. The other thing is also we want to review it just that in that governance structure, if it is the education program, we don't give it only to the office of the district education officer. We only ask them to do what we would call projects. They do a project proposal that we want to train so many new members of the BOG or BOM, and then it will cost us so much. Then we look at it and we say, yes, it is possible. If it is not possible, we tell them scale it down or do it in phases. There should be now a committee within the board vetting the projects which are coming from one particular sector, say education sector, one sector, I mean agricultural sector, and so on. And the question we should always, we are going to be asking, and that is why we should have an M and the E, that is monitoring and the evaluation system, is to ask, what is it going to bring to CSEF? If we say commit about 500,000 to a project in agriculture, then we should be able to ask ourselves what we rate, how we rate, or by how much we rate in benefit CSEF, so that it is able to make more grants. So this particular area of governance structure is very, very, very important, and we need to do it carefully and with a vision, because if we don't have a vision, then there is very little which is going to come out of that. I think I've responded to.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cyprian. So I see that there are many questions and our time is fast spent. What I'm going to do is do a round of all the panelists and presenters. What is your last word of advice to us as we exit this conversation? If there's nothing else that we had, the one thing you want us to take away, what is it? So Grace, Kotso, Cyprian, Francis, Catherine, each of you, please turn on your videos and give us that one parting shot. What should we do? What should we take away from today?
Oh, yeah, if I can say my last thought is that once you start an NGO or a CBO, you must be committed to it. There is no issue of giving up. Yeah. If you give up, then that will be, it will end up in a tatters. That means that way. And the integrity is a very, very critical matter in the whole process, because people must be really trust in you. just like the way they have built in trust in me for the last 30 years or so, and they will keep you giving you their resources if they have trusted you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cyprian. Catherine, can we come to you? What's your parting shot?
My parting shot really is that it is important that we start from where we are and really begin to build, look around inwardly, even just to look at the resources locally that we can tap in, where are the opportunities, and especially have a business mindset. As an organization, as a CSO, are there opportunities that you can, in the way we live and do our things, can we also find opportunities where we can be able to build our funds from? But just lastly, how then do we go, how do we build structures that will support the sustainability of those resources? I think that is very key, and leadership as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Francis, over to you, and then Grace.
So for me, one takeaway from this meeting is I think the importance of learning is something that I've learned and I'm going to take away with me. So we need to learn, but also to unlearn as well. So one of the areas, for instance, that I have not tapped much is the ability for us to build alliances, to work together. Because like our governments, we are in this region, in East Africa regions, governments are learning from each other. Corporate sector, they're learning from each other. Why are we not learning from each other? So maybe this is something that we need to work on it and build a culture in which there are so many good things happening from our friends and colleagues and other entities out there, which can be beneficial to us. So learning is very important.
Thank you so much, Francis. Grace, what is your parting shot?
Thanks, Jackie. I'm trying not to start a whole other presentation just because there are very many questions coming out. But what I wanted to not leave people without a place to go and have some of these questions answered. And so when inviting for those who would want further to go into in-depth around this, I'm happy to say that we will have capacity to do that in terms of going into a bit more detail, speaking specifically to the steps. How do you do it? What structure do you need? How do you address issues around tax? How do you address issues around your formation? Around the matching funds, I'll also speak a bit about that. So to inform people that we're not leaving you high and dry, for lack of a better word, but if you can drop an email to the email info@kcdf.or.ke, and we're going to also put that in the chat box. Then you just put in the title, Financial Resilience. We're going to consolidate all your questions, even if you just want the presentation, and we will then be able to reach out to you, either as a group or individually, and we will be having this further conversation, not only in terms of what we've discussed here, but also going into a bit more depth. So just to clarify, so that then no one leaves the conversation with any misunderstanding, there are different levels of matching funds that KCDF has had. So we have matched in the past endowment funds. Currently, we match projects as well. So for instance, for those of you who have participated in our golf tournament, it's one way that we raise resources for communities. So the resources that we raised from our golf tournament on the 18th of March goes into our Pamoja for Change project, and that's a matching fund project. We have proposals that we have already received from organizations at the local level that are carrying out, be it a restoration of a school or even around an agribusiness idea, and we match the funds that that organization raises from their work and from the local community. So when we say we match their funds, let's say, for instance, they hold a fundraiser, or they have people within the local community that are willing to donate time towards the reconstruction, for instance, of a classroom, and they raise, for instance, let's say $300. And as KCDF, we bring our $300 and match that, so that then the project has a total of $600 to undertake the work that they're doing. So we've had different modalities around matching. The one that Mr. Ruingu was speaking about for CEDA in the early years was around the endowment, which was then a matching fund, so that then there's no confusion for people leaving the call. But for me, Jackie, the key part in short is that having your values straight, setting up investment vehicles that are able to raise resources, reinvest into the work that you're doing as a civil society organization is one of the key ways that we can build financial resilience. So the organization continues doing the key program work that they're doing, but you have an investment vehicle that is linked to your organization that plows back the money to the projects that you're undertaking is one way to build financial resilience. So ensuring that you set it up correctly, that the values are clear, that you have professionals who are able to assist you to do that is very, very important. As KCDF, we focus on building community foundations. And so we have a project that we're building community foundations. And what that simply means is that you're able to address community work, community needs, from raising resources locally to address those challenges. So for those who would want to get more information, contacts of the panelists, please drop us an email and we'll be able to share that with you. But we do endeavor, I know we're doing this in partnership with CivSource Africa and also with FCS in terms of a deeper conversation around financial resilience. Thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank you, Grace. And we will go to, so what is your last word for us?
Thank you, Jackie. I think maybe I'm going to leave you with two questions, and I think Grace has captured some of my questions. And the first question that I want to leave you with is, why should we not set up our own investment companies, not necessarily run by us, but owned and controlled by us? I'm going to leave you with that question. The second question, why should we not develop our own development activists into highly trained investment specialists? Because they would advise us on how to do this thing. And why should we not go to our universities and start recruiting investment professionals to come and join our foundations and assist us in setting up our own investment companies, because they know how the financial market works and how we can go about raising funding to set up investment companies. And for me, those are the two. And maybe my last question: why should we not raise funding to facilitate us buying highly profitable companies that pay good dividends? Right? Why should we not engage with our billionaires in our countries and say to them, this is the work we do. We have a challenge of being completely dependent on donor money. Why not, as Dangote, sell us a portion of your company? Or why don't you donate shares instead of you giving us a grant? Why don't you give us shares so that we own part of your company? As you pay dividends on an annual basis, that dividend come to us. And I think we probably need to change the narrative also of how we engage with our donors. And I think to start challenging them and say, look, yes, we really appreciate that you're giving us grant money, but can we have a different conversation? Can you split your grant around grant development activities, but can you also give us a portion for us to start looking at companies that we think pay good dividends, and where we could see whether we can buy into those companies. And those are the few things that I think I should leave you with.
Thank you so much, Kotso. And we want to, as CivSource, in fact, delve into that as we are part of the consortium that Grace talked about. How about as grant makers or as part of our grant making, we enable people invest some of that money instead of always assuming they should spend it to zero and come back with a begging bowl again. And finally, last but not least, we will go to Purity, who will send us off with a vote of thanks and whatever else she wants to leave us thinking about and mulling over. Purity, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you to everybody. I think my job is quite easy after all the panelists and the presenters. Just the insightful information they've shared, Kotso jogging our minds and giving us brilliant ideas on how we can actually reach financial resilience. So my job is actually to just say thank you. We're really glad that we've been able to share our experience and also bring on board some of our partners. That's the Kagiso, SIDA, some of our really good partners from the community to share their experiences on this journey of financial resilience. We really do appreciate, and we hope that you had some good learnings and some takeaways. I've seen the comments, I've seen some of your comments and questions. So I believe even with the questions that Grace has shared, that you'll share in the info, we'll be able to give you more insight and also share some of the presentations that were presented here. I would like to take this time to thank all the participants. We had around 168 participants joining us today. So that is really kudos to you for joining us for this important conversation. We really do appreciate that. I also want to thank the presenters and the panelists, starting by thanking Mr. Cyprian Riongo from SIDA. Also, Mr. Kotso Schumann, thank you so much from Kagiso Capital. We really want to thank you for your insights and the Kagiso family for working with KCDF and also being just being available for this session and sharing your experience. I believe everybody here has left saying we want to grow up and become Kagiso family. So that was really insightful. We also want to thank Mr. Francis Kiwanga from Foundations of Civil Society, Tanzania, for his insights. My colleague, Catherine Kiganjo, thank you so much for taking us through that journey. It's really important for us to always go back to why KCDF was started and the founder's vision of KCDF. And I'm glad that you're still there 25 years down the lane. I also want to say thank you so much to Jackie. Thank you so much for being an amazing facilitator and for the seamless facilitation of this, for us also ending on time. It's good also to always mention that you've ended on time. Also, I want to mention, to actually give an appreciation to the founders of KCDF. We could not be here as KCDF if our founders did not share the vision, lay the proper foundation for us to actually be here and do what we're doing and talk about financial resilience. Also to the board and trustees, the board of directors and trustees, I know Athanam is here. Janet, who is also a part of, from her being a former CEO, she's also part of the directors of KCDF in one of our entities. I really want to thank her for just being available and just listening to us and making sure that we are still on course, I know. And also I want to thank the entire KCDF team for organizing this. That is led by Natasha, who's been part of the committee that has been setting up this whole webinar. We really want to say thank you. Thank you so much. Last but not least, I also want to thank the Global Fund for Community Foundations. They've made this webinar possible by supporting us financially and working with us through this journey. So I really want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody. We really do appreciate you taking 2 hours of your time from your busy schedule to just join us and listen to this important conversation. So thank you so much. Please do have a good evening. And for those that are in different continents, please have a good morning and good afternoon, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Natasha. Take us away. And congratulations, KCDF. We all want to be like you when we grow up.